And I think what's fascinating is a lot of what you do is in sort of the medium of stand-up comedy. And so if I was asked, like, could you do a comedy set about material science? I'm like, no, I can't. What got you into it, and how do you approach it?
So I first got involved in it during my PhD, which I did at UCL. They had a brilliant sort of program for postgraduate students where you could take a course in all sorts of different things, like languages, public speaking, blah, blah, blah. And one of them was public engagement. And I honestly can't tell you why I decided to go to that one. I just thought that it sounded interesting. Yeah. So I went, and it was run by a guy who was head of public engagement at the time called Steve Cross. And Steve was the person that set up 2 comedy nights, one called Bright Club and one called Science Show Off. They do a similar thing, and it's where academics or researchers will do a small 9-minute stand-up comedy set about their work for public audiences. That was the premise of it. Anyway, I'm quite a sort of teacher's pet, I guess.
Right.
I like to contribute in learning environments. And so I took this course anyway, and was quite vocal during the course.
Hands up.
During the day, all the hands up. Yeah. And at the end of the day, Steve came up to me. He's a good friend of mine now.
Right.
Steve came up to me and said, like, "Oh, you seem like you would be like good at doing stand-up comedy about your research." But the terrible side of this is that, like, I was like very, very scared of public speaking, even though I was quite like good at contributing, like in a class environment.
They're completely different, like completely different
I think
skills.
So.
Yeah.
So like I said yes because I like to please people in authority.
So
Yeah. And then I was like, oh man, now I'm going to have to actually do this. So a few weeks later, I did my first stand-up comedy set, which was about hydrogen storage materials. And it didn't go too badly. I was incredibly terrified of it at the time. But, the audience were very kind. They laughed at some of the bits. And then I was like, okay, that's really interesting, because some of the jokes that I wrote didn't quite work. And I'm not sure why. And some of the things that I said, like, improvised and worked really well. And some of the things that I said, like, they laughed at, but I'm not sure why. Anyway, so there was this like seed of intrigue that was planted in my mind about stand-up comedy. And I think as a person, this is going to sound actually quite un-British to say, but like I tend to be quite good at things that I try.
Right.
Like that sounds very big-headed. I suppose what I mean is that, like, I'm not very used to failing. I'm not very used to being bad at stuff. And so with stand-up comedy, I was like, I wasn't very good, but I would quite like to be better.
Right. I feel that's something that, we've both been to Oxford. That's something that's very common when people just they're not bad at anything that they really do. And because the moment you're sort of bad at something, you sort of stop. Like, I noticed this in myself. The moment I'm like bad at something, I just like almost immediately decide I don't like it and stop doing it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a lifetime of doing that. And so, like, I've come to think that I'm good at stuff, but actually what it is that I just don't do the stuff that I'm bad at.
Right.
But stand-up comedy intrigued me to such the extent that I was like, no, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm interested as to what this is about. So that's what I did. And over the last 6-7 years, I've been doing stand-up comedy about science and being a scientist. And it's taught me just an incredible amount about myself, about science, about how to communicate, how to think about audiences.
It's quite brutal. Like, as in the stand-up comedy is like one of the most brutal ways you can refine. Like when people take an axe and bash it with a stone. I sort of feel that's the equivalent. They're like, you say something that's not funny, people just aren't going to laugh.
It's true. I mean, it's very character building, but it forces you to communicate better. And it's. I think I learned such a lot about how to communicate science through doing stand-up, and I think it's definitely really helped me in my career. Like, when I wrote my PhD thesis, I was thinking about stand-up comedy as I was doing it, but in the sense that I was thinking of my audience. Like, I was thinking of these like tired, jaded professors that were having to read this at like 10 o'clock at night, the night before my Viva. And I tried to make it entertaining for them. No, you know, I did put one joke in, but I didn't put loads of jokes in. But it was trying to make it engaging and readable in a way that I think most people that write kind of, you know, those kinds of
academic writing is very, very dense and
totally.
It's a labour to read. And I think,
we so often fall into the status quo of, I read papers that are this dry, so therefore I'm going to write a really dry paper.
Yep.
And I just thought, well, actually, what happens if I write a literature review that makes characters out of the researchers and brings a bit of drama into the race to find, you know, like this new material that was going to save hydrogen and stuff. And it was more fun for me doing it like that as well.
No, completely. And it's more endurable to read. And I think that I was reading a book quite recently on writing, and it's almost harder to write something with really good clarity. Like, it's quite easy to write words around a topic that sort of, they hide your, like, a lack of understanding on the writer's part, right? But they sound very intelligent. It's actually really difficult to write clear prose because it actually has to be clear in your head before you write it. And I imagine that comedy is almost a level above that requirement.
It's like the extreme version of that. Yeah, like when you have like 5 minutes to communicate something, you can't beat around the bush. And like when you're trying to get across the concept of a joke, you've got a punchline, like 5 words. You know, you distill and distill and distill in an iterative process, usually when you're writing comedy and performing comedy, until you've got the exact right words in exactly the right order. You say it in the right tone of voice that you know is going to work best. Which is, a brilliant analogy for so many different types of communication, just getting your point across in a clear way.
No, 100%. No, it's super cool. It's super exciting. And you see like comedians literally spending years working on, I mean, an hour of stand-up. And it looks it almost looks like they're improvising. You know, and you always get a heckler or whatever in any of these like Netflix specials. And they just have the perfect response. And it always looks spontaneous, but like it's 100% not.
Definitely. Yeah, it's all practice. And I think one of the things that sets professional comedians apart is their ability to make the material that they've been doing for the last 4 years sound as fresh as it does when you listen to them.
I think they're the best presenters. Like of all presenters, I put comedians as, you know, they're dodging laser beams at the same time as, you know, as communicating things that are often quite either complex or like personal.
Yeah.
So would you recommend stand-up comedy to people in science trying to, I guess, get into do these forums that you started on, do they still exist or?
Yeah, they do. Actually, Bright Club. So Steve started Bright Club at UCL, but now it's spread to lots of different unis in the UK. They run their own Bright Clubs. Science Show Off is based generally in London, but like sometimes there are some in other cities as well. And so, I definitely recommend. It's, as you say, it's one of the most like terrifying things that you can do, but like it's such a steep learning curve and I got so much out of it and I'm still going now. And actually it changed the trajectory of my career.
Right.
From like doing lab research to being a science communicator.